It's a well-known fact that a Pokemon can learn any number of moves, but it can only know up to 4 at a time. It's also true that a particular kind of Pokemon may have access to up to 3 different abilities, but an individual will only have 1. And while EVs and IVs are something that you have some level of control over, base stats are unchangeable. But at the same time, none of that really has to be true, does it? I mean, it's all true in the core Pokemon RPG games. The keyword here being games. Now, imagine a world where Pokemon isn't a game. That's the world that we see through the games. What do you think the rules are there? If you watched my very first video, you know that I'm of the opinion that all of the aspects of the Pokemon franchise are based on a sort of ideal Pokemon world. So the games, the anime, the manga, they're all giving us different versions of that world. If you haven't seen that video, I'll put a link somewhere here. You should go check it out. In the case of the games, there's a whole bunch of ways that that real world of Pokemon needs to be gamified, sort of simplified in order to make it playable. So the question is, stats, moves, abilities, is any of that real? Or was it all just made up for the purposes of making a game? To be clear, when I'm talking about a real world of Pokemon, I mean a world where a Meowth is as real as my cats are in our world. Well, except that Meowth has like mutant abilities. So think about this. What if my cats, or any pets that you might have, what if they were like Pokemon? What moves would they know? Probably something like Scratch or Bite, or Slash if you make it angry. Or if you have a dog, maybe it uses Tackle and Lick when you come home from a trip. Or if your dog is big, maybe it knows Takedown and Crunch instead. Maybe your pet uses Growl when it's uneasy and Tail Whip when it's excited. Maybe it can be taught Agility or Quick Attack. It might even beg for treats with fake tears. My point is that most real pets can do all that and more. So why not a Pokemon? Why would a Poochyena be limited to only 4 moves when a real Pooch can easily remember a lot more? And I think that Poochyena can learn and remember more than 4 moves. If we look at the anime canon, there's actually a few examples of this. The most prominent one was Lieutenant Surge's Raichu in the original series, using 6 different moves against Ash's Pikachu. Here's something else to think about. Moves that are really similar, like Thundershock and Thunderbolt. Are they really 2 different, separate things? I mean, Thundershock and Thunderbolt have exactly the same effect, except for a trade-off of PP for power. So isn't it likely that they're actually the same skill, just performed at different intensities? So Thunderbolt is really just Thundershock delivered with more power, so that it does more damage but also drains more energy from the user. So maybe moves, as we know and love them, aren't really physical or physiological aspects of the Pokemon world. A Pokemon can learn more than 4 things. The 4-move limit is probably completely arbitrary, just a way that the developers came up with to simplify the world of Pokemon into the games. Pokemon is such a complex and competitive game, and it's been running on handheld systems for most of its life, so it's probably not realistic to expect a battle system that's as fluid as Super Smash Bros. Or Pokémon Tournament. I mean, those games are complex too, but they are dedicated fighting games with a lot fewer characters, whereas the core Pokemon RPGs have a lot more going on than just the battles. And there's a similar situation with abilities. Especially when an ability represents something intrinsic about the Pokemon, it wouldn't really make sense to think that individuals that have a different ability don't have that intrinsic characteristic. For example, most Sharpedo have rough skin, but some have the hidden ability Speed Boost, and Mega Sharpedo have strong jaw. So does that mean that Speed Boost Sharpedo and Mega Sharpedo have silky smooth skin just because they don't have rough skin? I mean, it's possible, but I don't think it's likely. What is more likely is that some Sharpedo have the ability to swim significantly faster than others, and Mega Sharpedo just have a really strong bite. So those characteristics supersede the roughness of the skin in defining which ability they get. That's why both Rough Skin and Speed Boost Sharpedo switch over to Strong Jaw when they Mega Evolve. It's not that Mega Evolution makes them smoother or slower, it's just that their jaw becomes really freaking strong. So that's the ability that gets assigned. Have you noticed that a lot of times there's a big difference between what the Pokédex tells us and the Pokemon's actual base stats? The Pokédexes in Yellow, Silver, and Soul Silver tell us that Pidgeot can fly at Mach 2. That is double the speed of sound. But in those generations, its speed stat was only 91. And that seems way too different, like those things cannot both be true. But maybe there's a way they can. If we were simplifying the real world of Pokemon into a game, how do we come up with those base stats? What does that speed stat really mean? Well, we would need to measure speed in some sort of standardized way so that we can compare it between all Pokemon. But speed isn't just one thing. Animals in the real world have all kinds of skills that might fall into the speed category. Cheetahs have the fastest dash speed, but they can't keep that up for too long. Something like a horse can maintain a good speed for much longer before getting tired. Or a fly can't cover a lot of distance, but they have an incredible reaction time, which is why they're so difficult to catch. So how do we compare all of that with a single stat value? Since we're using stats as part of this turn-based battle system, maybe it would make sense for speed to be how quickly a Pokemon can strike. So being able to move quickly or suddenly are more important in this case than maintaining a high speed over a long distance. So going back to Pidgeot, maybe it really can fly at Mach 2, but maybe it only reaches that speed when it's swooping down at its prey from high up like a peregrine falcon. And if that's the case and it needs to fly up really high before it can reach that speed, then its Mach 2 is basically irrelevant. And Pidgeot can be given a relatively low speed stat because it's just not the right kind of speed. The last thing I want to talk about today is types. We're used to thinking of them as sort of like an aspect of a Pokemon's biology, but there's a lot of funky stuff going on. There's dragons that aren't dragon type, fish that aren't water type, even bugs that aren't bug type. Tons of Pokemon gain types when they evolve, but there's also plenty that change a type entirely, like Skrelp dropping the water type when it evolves into Dragalge. When a new type is introduced, there's always Pokemon that have that type added, or even that switch over entirely. Plus, types kind of correlate with the kinds of moves a Pokemon can learn, but especially in the early generations, there were a lot of Pokemon that did not learn a single move of their type by level up. So what if types don't actually exist in the real world of Pokemon? Maybe, like base stats, they're a simplification. So the types that get assigned in the games are just the ones that best reflect how that Pokemon interacts with the world. Most bird Pokemon can fly and easily avoid ground-based attacks, so we give them the flying type and make them immune to ground-type attacks. Pokemon from especially cold environments don't do too well in high heat, so we give them the ice type and make them weak to fire. An aquatic Pokemon can use water-based moves really well, so we give them the water type and give them the stab on those moves. So types are based on Pokemon biology, but it's not like Pokemon have genes that decide their types. Those were only decided for the games. If we're thinking of a real world of Pokemon that is just represented through the games and all these mechanics, there's not really any reason to think that every aspect of the games is objectively real. A lot would have to be quantified and simplified in order to make the games playable, especially on something like the Game Boy. Thank you so much for watching, and welcome to PokéStudies. The driving question behind this series is, if we look at the Pokemon games as a representation of a more real world of Pokemon, what can we learn? If you like this episode, hit the like button and drop me a comment below, or reach out to me on Twitter and Tumblr. The links are in the doobly-doo. This series is honestly the whole reason this channel exists, but these videos take a lot of work, so PokéStudies episodes will only be coming out once a month. In the next one, we'll look at two mechanics that you might have noticed were missing from this video: level and evolution. In the meantime, I do have plenty of other Pokemon content coming, so make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. I'm Umbreon Libris, and I'll see you in the next chapter.